A violent, mentally ill assaulter who stabbed 3 people is now cleared for college. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Ontario is back in the news today again with some more foolishness. According to the National Post, Ontario's top court has upheld a decision to allow a man who was found not criminally responsible in a knife attack at Toronto's military recruitment center to take college classes on his own. Yes, you heard that correctly. He was cleared because he effectively pled insanity in regards to the attack. Now, he without a doubt stabbed and assaulted people at a Canadian military facility. That is not up for debate. The court spared him, though, due to mental illness, which his defense claimed led to his absorption of extremist violent rhetoric, and in turn, that ideology led to his attack in the first place. So the attack occurred in 2016. Now, they're looking to set this man free at college so he can pursue classes independently. My question is he insane or is he not? That was the saving grace that absolved him of his actions. I would assume insanity to the point of wanting to kill Canadian military recruits is not something easily shrugged off in just 3 years. Take clinical depression, for example, or any other mental illness that you want. In the case of depression, that can take months to years to fully recover from. Some people even take longer than that. Now, you're going to tell me that someone deranged enough to stab multiple people, yeah, he's going to be okay in only 3 years. Now we're laying the reins off completely too, setting him to college where he'll be in contact with students, admin, and staff. Seems kind of nutty to me. This is really a ludicrous decision by the justice system, and it's far too lax in a still potentially dangerous scenario. Prosecutors are arguing that the courts gave too much consideration to Anyalnai Ali, that's his name, the guy who was accused and did carry out those stabbings. They're saying that the courts are being way too serious when they're thinking about his well-being, and they're not putting enough attention when it comes to public safety. I think they've hit the nail right on the head with that statement. It is 100% correct. Now, before we dive deeper into Ali's story, I want to lay out his attack on the military recruitment center first so we can get a better grasp of the type of individual that we're talking about here. So, as mentioned, the attack occurred at a military forces building. Ali walks into the premise and he stabs his first victim, a corporal, stationed at the entrance. At this point in time, all hell is starting to break loose because, someone just got stabbed. A second military member tries to apprehend Ali, and that guy gets stabbed too. At this point, you have to commend the personnel for not immediately jumping to lethal force. That would seemingly be an appropriate reaction, but thankfully the officers were able to maintain their composure. Now, at this point, a third person tries to intervene and Ali slashes at them, but they miss. So that worked out positively for the third victim, or could-be victim. She was still traumatized by almost getting stabbed by a lunatic. Now, according to police, a group of 6 to 8 trained soldiers stepped in at this point and they subdued the intruder. Imagine the chaos that could have transpired if those people didn't jump in at that point. Waiting for the police to arrive would have allowed ample time for this deranged individual to stab up the place further. The 2 victims were then taken to the hospital, but luckily none of them had injuries that were life-threatening. So, Ali is then captured, he was transported to jail, and he gets served with 9 charges. 3 counts of attempted murder for each person he stabbed at, 2 charges of aggravated assault, 3 charges of assault with a weapon, and 1 count of carrying a weapon dangerous to the public. So that's pretty hectic right there. It's a heavy list. Any ordinary person who was facing charges like that, they would have been screwed. So the trial goes on and a charge of terror gets added to the bucket, but it's found that Ali has schizophrenia. The court agrees that on all sides that he was a radical individual, but his mental illness led to his further derangement. Finally, the courts reached a verdict and they found that he was not criminally responsible for his actions. The exact wording was that he was acquitted of terror charges related to these acts, and they found that he was not criminally responsible for the lesser offenses. Alright, interesting way of phrasing that, the lesser offenses, like trying to stab and kill multiple Canadian military personnel in cold blood. I think dropping the terror charges are fine, but the courts, let's not downplay what this man did by using euphemisms. It's almost disrespectful. The ruling itself, not being criminally responsible, usually translates to a crime did occur, but the person in question could not appreciate the consequences, legality, or moral wrongness of their actions due to a mental illness, and because of that they are absolved. Those are the principles established by the courts, and they're not really absolved per se. They might not face these same consequences as a sane person, but they'll still be subject to some form of detainment at a hospital or a psychiatric ward. So these are the principles that are established by the courts, so we can realize that this man, he was so far gone, he cannot even differentiate that attempted murder was morally and legally wrong. Now look, if you want to plead insanity, that's one thing. But it should not be a consequence-free ticket though. It's just a different form of punishment strategy, more so aimed at rehabilitation. Those who are deranged, they may need a different approach to correction, and that's fine. Perfectly understandable. The problem with this case though, is 3 years later, you're out after stabbing up a military facility and you're being enabled to attend college classes. You're let into the education system alone. How asinine do you have to be to think that's a good idea? I'm really questioning the judges in this case and the governance board. We've already established something too. The man is not capable of thinking rationally, or correctly for that matter. A couple years prior, he supposedly couldn't even tell his actions were wrong, as he was stabbing people. Now, he's going to be unleashed with some students? That's foolishness. What did they even base this decision on? I'll tell you. He's been compliant with the hospital ward, and he currently resides there. Even when he goes to school, he's still going to reside there. He'll only be set free to attend the classes, and prosecutors have rightfully pointed out that the hospital environment, even if he's doing well there, it is designed for people like him, and that is not the same as a college. Here's the golden kicker in all of this. The review board, the people whose job it is to analyze whether or not a mentally ill defendant is fit to enter society, here's what they have to say. The board found that Ali continues to pose a significant threat to the public and should remain at the hospital. They do admit that he should allow for progressive steps to one day allow for the individual to attend college though. So you kind of just have to ask yourself, what's going on here? Herp, derp, let's just let him go to college where vulnerable students and staff reside with no supervision one day? I can't stress this enough. This only happened 3 years ago. When does the board think he's going to be ready, and why are we having this story and this conversation happen right now? It's almost as if they are prepping for something in the short term, which should not even be on the table. To be fair, this is only access to college, and after class, he will supposedly return to hospital if he follows his orders, but come on now. This is really just silly. I wouldn't want this individual to be in a class with me, let alone people I care about, and I'm sure every student's going to feel the same way. I think the only consideration right now should be getting his mind right, not contemplating what diploma he's going to pursue. And if you're foolish enough to think that someone like that is going to abide by the rules, look at what happened in Toronto just recently. A mentally estranged inmate, he was able to waltz out of the detainment center, board the plane, and fly internationally. He fled the country. These guys aren't stupid. That was a massive slip up. The guy who fled the country, you know what he was guilty of? He took a meat cleaver and was chopping people up with it. Of course he had schizophrenia, but at the same time, these people are deranged. Enabling them to return to society in their current states, it's irresponsible. What even is the justification for that? In the supposed name of virtue? It's nonsense to me, and it should remain under the tightest restrictions because we're unsure of where these individuals are even at currently with their mental capacities. The safety of the public needs to supersede the individual's freedom if they've demonstrated such mental illness to be going out in public and trying to kill people. It makes no sense. And here's another question. If something happens, not saying it will with this guy, but the heightened possibility exists, who is going to take ownership for that? The judges? The board? It should be. as they've actively decided to expose students to an unnecessary risk. My fundamental concern is that this discussion about letting him go to college has been approved now. It shouldn't even be had. Why are we even thinking about letting this man attend college? Take into account the crimes that occurred, and on top of that, his mental state, and the timeline. None of it adds up, and it makes you wonder how often things like this happen and how many times it gets swept under the rug. Only when the media talks about it do people realize, oh, something like this is really happening? Something this weird is becoming a normalized thing when it comes to mentally deranged inmates? Wow, it's kind of breathtaking. All around, it's poor handling of a hazardous situation, and Canadians should be asking more questions. Putting these institutions on the spot, making sure that they're held accountable, because their number one responsibility should be to society and the public, not to the inmate. And let's be clear about one thing too. These are not peaceful, mentally ill people that we're talking about here. These are not innocent individuals. They've actively gone out and demonstrated that their mental illness has devolved to a point where they can't even differentiate between morality and what's right or wrong. They've devolved to the point where they're actively trying to kill people with either a knife or a meat cleaver. They're getting caught, and then a couple years later, they're being reintroduced into society as if everything is just peachy, as if they're going to be able to adapt in such a short amount of time. It's nonsense, and it really has to stop. I don't know where the court's priorities are. I don't know where the board's priorities are, but one thing is clear. It's a jumbled up mess right now, and it really needs a quick fix because, God forbid, things can easily fall to a more chaotic state than they currently are, and we're beginning to see that with these types of accommodations. Totally unnecessary, and it even detracts from the predominant goal, which is rehabilitating the individual. You don't need to let them into society unsupervised, and that's the kicker too. Unsupervised. Why be so risky like that? If you want to let them out, okay, maybe that's arguably good for their recovery, but to do it unsupervised? It's idiotic. And honestly, I'm at a loss for words for how stupid these groups can be. So that's about it for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and follow me on Twitter at Perri Platform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.